Somewhere between the late 1850s and 1860s, the game of tennis was born out of a marriage of the French game of real tennis, or rackets, and the Spanish game of basque pelota. They were combined on an estate in Birmingham, England, and the game of tennis was born. In the century since, England has remained the spiritual home of the game of tennis, but without the success one might suspect. For nearly half a century, the country went without a champion until Andy Murray quenched the drought. But for English women, they would have to wait a little bit longer till a very special player in very special circumstances won in a very special way. This is what you don't know about Grand Slam champion Emma Raducanu. Welcome to What You Don't Know About Sports, where we delve into the forgotten stories, teams, and athletes of sports history and question why the hell takes on today's sports. I'm Matt, and this is Blake.
Hello.
And today we're talking about what I think is our youngest subject to date. We're not going deep in the history books for this one, but it's an improbable story nonetheless. Tennis player Emma Raducanu. I've now successfully said that name 2 times in a row. And we're looking for perfection on this. But before we get started, Blake, what's your most memorable out of nowhere story?
I just want to preface this episode by saying I may or may not mispronounce her name. So if it's imperfect, it will be my fault. We covered a very memorable and out of nowhere story. I have no idea how long ago it was, but the 2015-2016 English Premier League champions Leicester City.
Oh, that's a good one, yeah.
That was very much. I don't know that anybody. I mean, the odds before the season would just say on its own that was extremely unlikely, and kind of similar to the subject of today's episode. Didn't sustain that success long term. Now, I mean, this is very recent, very, very recent. And that was 7, 8 years ago now, as of this recording. And so she still has time to maintain the excellence. An individual I thought of, though, in an individual sport, who over the last 2 years was ranked in like the thousands as an individual player in their sport, and is very recently, depending on when you listen to this episode, is the number 1 person in their sport is Scotty Scheffler. He was in the thousands in world rankings 2 or 3 years ago. Went on a tear early last season, and is still top 3, top 5, top 1 golfers in the world. And so that's I honorable mention, though, would be like just an upset. They didn't like sustained greatness, but I just like upset stories. I got to shout out my App State Mountaineers for beating Michigan. That was sick. I got to shout out your NC State Wolfpack against Houston.
Yeah, don't call it an upset.
And I don't know how much of this is an upset either. Like, the odds were against them. But they were undefeated at the time. Holly Holm knocking out Ronda Rousey. Yeah, she was 9-0 at the time. Holm was 9-0, 10-0 at the time. But Rousey had finished her 3 opponents prior to this fight all under a minute, and so everyone just assumed that she would just get ran through. And then the head kick heard round the world sent Ronda Rousey to WWE.
For sure. Yeah. Out of the whole sport. Yeah, I was going to give my honorable mention to a combat sport, to Buster Douglas knocking out Mike Tyson at the height of Iron Mike. Was definitely obviously talent to be in a world championship fight, but not supposed to happen like that. And then like Rocco Mediate in that U.S. Open square off with Tiger where they went 18.
The playoff.
18-hole playoff. Not all the way out of nowhere. It didn't pull off the win, but something kind of cool too. I'm going to give mine to just because it happened as a child, the 2001 New England Patriots, who were picked by absolutely no one to do anything good.
No one.
Drew Bledsoe, he punctured a lung in the first third of the season that got Tom Brady on the field.
Something like that.
And then just really didn't lose from that point forward. So that was out of nowhere. And the NFL, for its credit, is the one sport where that happens more than others, I think. So like you can get some wild stories like that, but I think that was a good one.
It's hard to think about Tom Brady in that way today, like obviously knowing everything that happened. But if you think like the people, there are probably tons of people who came out of nowhere, low draft picks, unknown people, and then all of a sudden burst through. But Tom Brady in particular, it's hard to be like, oh, the greatest football player of all time was a out of nowhere yeah, he kind of was. Watch the doc. They made a doc about it. He's in it. He'll tell you.
Oh yeah, he'll tell you all about it. Tommy loves him some Tommy. All right, let's get into our story for today. As I said at the top, England is traditionally thought of as the birthplace of tennis. And like, I think people who kind of casually follow tennis or just watch tennis for the Grand Slams may have the image that England, much like we do in soccer, that England is just this place full of a rich history and a rich pedigree of talented players and champions. And it just isn't that way. When Andy Murray won his first major, the U.S. Open in 2012, that was the first men's Grand Slam champion for the country since 1936. The women had not won one since Virginia Wade won Wimbledon in 1977. So it's not like they're just turning out Grand Slam champions left and right. They've got talent, they've got good players, but it is not. This is akin to like U.S. basketball regularly winning no medals at a Olympics or World Cup. Like we would not be happy in that situation. Or like the World Baseball Classic, the USA does not always win that, but if we showed up and got knocked out in pool play, we would be pretty ticked off. But here, birthplace of tennis, no tennis champions.
Yeah, it's hard to believe because you would say that this country who invented a sport should be the best country at that sport, at least like long term. I mean, I would think that I would gander to say that worldly basketball is catching up. I don't know. Well, for a myriad of reasons, I'm not sure that there will ever be like another performance like the Dream Team or the Redeem Team. People just take basketball a little bit more seriously. There are more countries in contention, and if this is one of the caveats, if our best players decide to go to these worldly tournaments, there's probably no chance. But because they all like to sit out and skip them, we're sending like our D teams, and then we get upset, and then America's like, how did we lose? Yeah. And it's like, well, it's kind of obvious why we lost, but yeah, that would be an appropriate equivalent. We just show up to the Olympics and don't make like the bracket. It's like, what do you mean? Yeah. We invented this.
Yes. England's problem, I think, is that they did their inventing the same time they did their imperializing, and they exported all of their sports to these other countries as they were being formed. And so everybody's kind of on an equal playing field in terms of soccer and tennis and even golf.
Cricket.
Compared to the British. Yeah, everybody's kind of... Everybody, yeah, cricket, you know? World's fastest growing sport. Also croquet. I don't know. That seems like that wasn't a British invention. But Emma Raducanu, that's 3 for 3, was born in Toronto on November 13th, 2002. She moved to London with her parents before she turned 2 years old. And even though the date is much newer than most of our subjects, the story isn't that much. She started playing tennis at a very early age. Obviously, in modern times, there's nothing surprising about that. Kids get started playing sports and the sport they choose pretty early on. She's got results. Like, you can find tournament results as early as 6 years old for her. So she was playing tennis and playing organized tennis pretty well very early on. And two things are clear about her junior career. She has a flair for the dramatic and for coming out of nowhere to demonstrate that flair for the dramatic. To wit, she joined the ITF, which is the International Tennis Federation. They are the governing body of tennis, even though the highest level tour is the WTA. The ITF runs junior tours, that second level tour underneath that. And so as a junior, she was not allowed to play with the ITF until she was 13 years old. She turned 13 years old, entered a tournament, and 8 days later, she was the champion of that tournament.
Jeez.
I'm gonna go enter the first junior tournament I can, and I'm gonna win
As quickly as possible. Good Lord.
So wasted no time at that. And she was a very good youth tennis player, perhaps labeled a prodigy. She was the UK national champion for 9U, 12U, and 16Us. So basically, there's some gaps there where she wasn't the champion, but basically every age group she participated in, she was the national champion in the UK.
That's a lot of U's. 9 and 12 and 16, and that's a lot of letters. I can't count that high. It is sort of a prodigy situation because winning your first ever professional tournament at 13, and then also being the best player at 9 years old, and then 12 years old, and still maintaining that through 16. Like, your entire youth is just surrounded or encompassed by this sport. Like, it's got to be all she did, because it's really hard, but you have to love it. Like, you might see a child prodigy, but then they fizz out. It's like they were really good at something, but the passion and the joy for whatever that thing is, it doesn't have to be a sport, it can be anything in life. The passion has to be there. It's really, really hard to be great at anything if you don't have a joy for it and a passion for it. And so it's kind of admirable that, like, she chose this path at a very, very young age and is still doing it to this day. But to have been so great at it at such a young age is incredible.
And I think as we go through her profile, one thing to keep in mind is, especially in modern times where I think we are like kind of predisposed to put youth whatever players on this path where you have to do this and this is your focus, and you're gonna play 4 AAU tournaments every weekend. I did not make that statistic up. I can go find you a person who told me they did that. And so one thing I want to bring up about her is she is very much a fan of and has many different interests. Now, whether those are played up as part of interviews and things, but she has like a working and detailed knowledge of Formula One. She's a Tottenham Hotspur fan because she's intelligent. She has interest in music and art. I think she speaks multiple languages. Like, so she's not just this tennis person. We're going to go do 8 hours of tennis and then whatever else in your life fits in. She seems to be a more traditional, well-rounded type of person. So that's something to keep in mind. You don't have to be a drone to be good.
Please don't specialize at 6. You can like more than one thing.
Yes. As she continues to grow, she turns pro on the ITF Women's Tour, and that is now the mid-level tour, the one just under the WTA that you might see on television. She turned pro in 2018. So if you're keeping track at home, she was 16 years old, or actually on her way to turning 16 years old when she turned pro. And she began winning minor tournaments pretty much on entry as well. In her first year as a pro, she won a pair of $15,000 to win tournaments in year one, won a pair of $25,000 to win tournaments in her second year as a pro. So we're talking 15, 16, 17 years old, winning tournaments that, especially in year two, total more than my salary for the year.
Right.
So shout out to her on that. So she's getting success. She's not one of the top ranked players in the world. This middle tour, if you're a golf fan, this is the Korn Ferry Tour type level of events. She might be one of the top 300, 400, 500 players in the world, but she's not like challenging for major spots, but still winning at her level, solid outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, well, that's where you have to start. Very rarely do athletes rather just appear in the pros without having done their work in lower level, like baseball. Baseball is a prime example of this. Like you very, very rarely you can't go to the major leagues immediately. All-time greats had to play in the minors for a bit. Very rarely you don't show up. Very few people show up on an NBA team and just take over. Like you have to do something. You might be a starter, but it's to be an all-star from the get and then stay on it. This again is pretty normal, like Korn Ferry stuff. Win your PGA card or earn it, move on, and then finally you reach the top.
I do want to just take a second here. This is chasing rabbits, but as we're recording this, the World Baseball Classic is going on, and you just said can't go straight to the majors, right? You got to spend your time, otherwise you're going to get eat up. I saw an internet discussion recently asking how well a team of college baseball all-stars would do at the World Baseball Classic, and people were actively entertaining the idea as if they would do well against even teams that were full of double-A baseball players. And they would not. I know they wouldn't because they show up to double-A and they struggle. It's that simple.
I hate this argument. This is off topic, but I hate this argument that like the college football national champion could play and defeat the worst NFL team that year.
Yeah.
Like let's get over ourselves. Get off the internet for a day. Get over yourself. Let's move on.
There's 20 pros on that team and there's 53 on the worst NFL team. Like this is not the same thing. All right, so anyway, that is to say that she is, despite being, I think a lot of times we think of women's tennis players are supposed to be these phenoms. They show up and they just dominate at 16 years old. And that's really not how it works in women's tennis, just like it is in most professional sports. So let's fast forward now to 2019, where Raducanu was going to be an alternate on what was then called the Fed Cup. It's now called the Billie Jean King Cup. This is a nations tournament. You organize, I think it's 6 or 7 players on a squad, and you play singles matches, doubles matches against other countries to see who is the best country out there, kind of like a President's Cup situation in golf. She was named an alternate in 2019 on that cup team, so one of the top women's tennis players in the United Kingdom, and she actually got bumped up onto the main roster of the team when one of her teammates decided that she would rather attempt to play in the 2020 Olympics instead. This gave Raducanu a spot on the roster where she was called, quote, the British player with the most potential by observers who were watching. But as we know, that player who attempted in the 2020 Olympics did not get to play, and neither did Raducanu in this event because we all shut down for COVID before the event could finish. It was a 1920 event, so by the time we got to 2020, we were all locked down. That was a terrible time, the best of times and the worst of times, depending on how you looked at it.
Maybe they should have done a bubble.
Well,
did they think of a bubble?
They did ish.
Hey, okay.
So she enters the COVID lockdowns ranked in the 300s in the world ranking. So she's not got a spot on the WTA tour quite yet. And England, like the rest of the world, had no sports, but also desperately needed television. If you remember back to when we had COVID, One of the reasons that launched this whole thing was sitting around watching the Last Dance documentary. Like that was our taste of live sports, was 2 hours of documentary every Sunday night. Horse. They had NBA and WNBA players playing horse against one another
on live on like
Zoom,
webcams. In their yards.
Zoom, in their yards, in their garages. Who was it? Mike Conley had like his own little college intramural gym set up on his property. That was wild.
It had like little bleachers and stuff.
We were watching race car drivers play iRacing against each other on national television. It was a thirst for live entertainment. And the same held in England. Now, it was more difficult to reopen stick and ball sports that had multiple players on teams. You had to go through unions. You had to get all the teams organized. It's easier to relaunch the country club sports, the individual type sports, because you just need a couple players to agree to show up. And in England, what they did was they created some small controlled situations, kind of like a bubble, to put on some TV and to get their players some experience. The Lawn Tennis Association, which is the governing body of tennis in England, launched a series of exhibitions that would end up making Raducanu a pretty household name in the country of England. First, she played as a member of the British Bulldogs, which is just a fun name, in a team event that they put on. This was some of the best. Andy Murray, for instance, played in it. And Raducanu actually beat Andy Murray in a mixed doubles match that ended up helping her team, the British Bulldogs, win this event. So she's already a champion in England. Then they launched a series of events called the Premier British Tour. So this was some of the best players from England again. Just get out there, play a couple of 16-person events. We'll keep track of points and name a champion at the end. Raducanu won the first event, won the last event, and became the tour's women's champion. Cut fresh out of COVID, just like hanging out. 2020 was a good year.
Right? That's youth. Yeah. Just showing up cold, just raw athleticism, raw talent. I hate all these sports buzzwords, by the way. I'm just saying them just to be ignorant. But
tennis is a good sport for this. She could really spin it. That's a good one.
The arm talent too, you know.
Oh, she's got good arm talent.
Anyway,
so 2020, a pretty good year. She becomes it looks like she's living up to this potential that everybody kind of sees in her, but she is still young. And more importantly, these are all exhibitions. So none of these events actually help her on a professional level. They don't elevate her rankings. They don't put her in line for any kind of spots at any Grand Slam tournaments. That would all come in 2021. In 2021, she has an absolute year. Like, if she has a better year than she had in 2021, she will have been living right. Let me tell you about it. First of all, she uses this kind of cult-like following she gets in the COVID events to try and appeal for a wild card spot at Wimbledon. I'll tell you more about how that works later. What's to know is that Wimbledon didn't want to give her one. They don't want the illusion that they're playing favorites, so they're just trying to get publicity for like this TikTok star, this person who's famous for these little made-for-TV events. They want her to earn it, and earn it she does. She goes out in a couple of events before Wimbledon. She loses in the first round of an event called the Viking Open, but in her next tournament, she makes it to the fourth round, which is the round of 16. And that was enough to convince Wimbledon to give her a wild card entry into the most famous tennis tournament in the world. And she's the national hero, and she lives up to that, winning her first 3 rounds in straight sets. She became the youngest British woman to make a Grand Slam quarterfinal. And given how starved Britain was for a tennis star, she became one. Now she runs into a little controversy and a little adversity in that round of 16 matchup where she pulled out trailing 6-3, 3-0 with alleged breathing difficulties. She had some health issues, had to pull out, and that was the first set she had dropped in Wimbledon. Her first Wimbledon. She had played in the junior Wimbledon before, hadn't won. Here, she's playing against the big girls and makes it to the round of 16. An impressive first showing.
Just shows up and competes immediately. That's hard. That's hard to do, especially in like a match play thing. Is it genuine question? Is it generally thought that like match play is more difficult than like golf playing against an entire field, or is it the opposite?
I don't know. I've not as many things get debated in sports. I guess because golf and tennis are a little kind of niche.
Yeah.
Niche.
Niche.
I've never heard that debated. And
Are they going through like a bracket in tennis? I mean, because golf does both, but tennis you can't do both. Like tennis has to be,
it's just a bracket.
Tennis has to be bracket match play. But I wonder, like, if you polled golfers, for example, I'm trying to put this into perspective, but like, I just wonder what would be more difficult for the players, like if the players had a vote. I don't know. Going through a bracket is kind of like a gauntlet because instead of just playing around, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. You have to make a judgment. I mean, it's very much matchup based at that point.
Yeah.
And you get anytime you do a tournament, you have bracket luck. Like,
sure.
Did you get seated in the right spot? Was the person who gives you trouble on your side or your quarter, or were they on the complete opposite side? Like, all of that plays a role. And one kind of thought I've had just watching the NCAA tournament of late is that tournaments really aren't about, like, if you re-racked a tournament, even a Grand Slam tournament, if you re-racked it, put all 128 back where they were and played it again, you would probably get a different champion unless it's Nadal on a clay court. You're probably going to end up with different results. And so it's less about the matchups and more about you being the person that in that 2-week stretch could win 6 tournaments, 6 games, 6 matches, which is what makes you the champion. Is you were able to win 6. Doesn't matter who you played. We could have put the worst 5 up against. Can you win 6 in a row? It's hard to win 6 in a row of anything in any sport. So that's kind of how I feel about it. I think it's harder to win one of those tennis tournaments because you don't know who you're going to play up against. In golf, if I go out and play well, I can beat everybody. In tennis, if I go out and play well, this one person who can put the ball in the one spot I don't like, I can struggle with. You know what I mean? Like, I control my destiny in golf. I really don't know, though.
That's what I was thinking, that like in an individual sport like tennis or golf, I think the bracket style match play type thing would be more difficult because you can't just, because you have to play against your opponent's strengths and weaknesses because you are playing directly against them. Your score is compared to theirs directly, as opposed to just like a golf round, for example, just going out and shooting the best round possible and you could still win, but your shot doesn't depend on other people's shots. Your score doesn't depend on other people's score. So
playing the course.
Yeah. The course is the defense in golf terms, at least in regular play. So yeah, I think this just incredibly difficult to show up like your first Grand Slam and run through it like this is, I don't know. The breathing difficulties thing, I don't know. But to get to that point and have not dropped a set is pretty good. Pretty good.
And to be like we said, England struggles in having Grand Slam champions, but they have had some decent players. And to be the youngest Grand Slam quarterfinalist in Wimbledon history, at least for a British player, that is impressive as well. What is even more impressive is what she does after Wimbledon, which is go back to school. And I don't just mean like show up and take some classes. The UK, as well as some other Commonwealth countries around the world, have these things called A levels. And this is for students over the age of 16. They are the equivalent of like our International Baccalaureate or AP classes. They are special level classes that you take. They are 2 years worth of study, and they contain an exam that you have to pass to get credit. Students can choose what subjects they sit for. They usually pick 3 or 4 subjects. They're graded on a scale of A to U, although it's mostly A, B, C, D, E. Students have to get a 40% to pass. So shout out for the lowering of the scale to 40%.
Dang.
40%. But it gets reported what you did. So if you are like an E student, your record is gonna say you received an E. If you don't make a 40, you get a U, which is unsatisfactory.
Yeah.
I would think 40 is actually unsatisfactory, but that's just me. If you make an A, obviously that's just great. If you make better than an 80% on all of the modules in a subject, you get an A star, and you get like a special certification. Right. So this is the English educational system. She goes back to school. She chooses in this little mini time she's got to do math and economics. She finishes with an A in economics and an A star in math.
Just like mid tennis prime tournament, possibly tournament winnings, just turned pro, go back to school and just ace everything.
Yes.
That's tough.
And took a pause on tennis to do it. Like, called her coach and was reviewing film, but was not like on the court in the gym playing with a coach regularly in preparation. Like, took a pause to go do this. This is Michael Jordan winning a national championship and then saying, "Hey, pause. Everybody, time out. I'm going to finish my degree and then I'm going to play basketball again." No.
Absolutely not in America anyway. They must have different morals because we like some money. We got to go get that bag.
Tiger Woods wins his first NCAA title and says, "I need to finish my degree here at Stanford. The PGA Tour can wait." Like, we would not do that.
No.
And to be fair, we don't know how she would have reacted had she won Wimbledon.
Sure.
She didn't. But still, she pauses tennis for a little bit to go get these academic certifications and does great at it. Like, well-rounded, like I said.
Wow.
Athletic and intelligent. And then she does turn her attention back to tennis. She comes to America for the hard court season. She played in a WTA 125 event in Chicago, making the final and defeating 3 top 100 players on her way. Remember, she is not one of those top 100 players. She's in the top 300 worldwide. And 100 is not necessarily the greatest players on earth. There's only 128 players in a main draw of a Grand Slam. So she's playing players towards the bottom of those rankings, but still top 100 players. She makes a final and it ends that hard court season ranked in the top 150 in the world, which puts her in the qualifiers for the US Open, which is where we will pause for a moment to do America's favorite show. We're America's favorite show. America's favorite segment, trivia.
Favorite segment on the favorite show.
I'm going to spoil the back half of our story. I've already called her a Grand Slam champion. We know how this is going to end if you've been paying attention to sports in the last 2 years. And so I'm going to spoil this. Someone in this episode is going to become the 8th youngest person to ever win a Grand Slam as a woman.
Someone.
That means someone. And now more than one someone, hopefully. That means there are 9 other people in the top 10 youngest women to ever win a Grand Slam. All you have to do is give me one of them. But I want to see how... I just smacked a pen.
You just threw something.
Everybody. Yes. I want to see how many of them you can name. The top 10 youngest women to win a Grand Slam in tennis.
I would say immediately, without asking qualifiers, I'm going to say that the Williams sisters are both on there.
Ooh. Oh, there is a Williams sister.
No,
Yes. One
on
of
the
the
top
Williams
top
sister
10
is a
worldwide.
yeah. One of the Williams sister was a more traditional age and career arc, and the other Williams sister was non-traditional on both ends of the career arc. If you want to figure out which
You
one's
said
which.
Grand Slam champion.
Correct.
Okay. So then Serena would be the youngest Grand Slam
Yes.
champion of the two.
Serena won the 1999 U.S. Open at the age of 17 years and 350 days. That is the sixth youngest person to win a Grand Slam.
Oh my God. Wait.
So you got one. So you got one. You've answered the question. Now how many can you get? You know some of these people. I guarantee it.
Yeah, there's names floating. Okay, I have another guess.
Yes.
And it's because I have been collecting the Guinness Book of World Record books.
Good.
Since 1999.
There you go.
And I distinctly remember on one of those, I don't remember which, but in like the sports records page, there was like a huge photo of this woman. I assume for being a fantastic young tennis player. So this is that's how I got here. Her name is Maria Sharapova. Is she on the list?
Okay, she is on the list. The Russian Maria Sharapova won the 2004 Wimbledon at the age of 17 years and 75 days, making her the fourth youngest person to win a Grand Slam currently. Number 4. So good, Maria Sharapova. That was one of the, I think I knew 4 of these. That was one of my 4.
Coming up with them off the top of my head is tough. Billie Jean King is not one.
Is not
right?
One of them, yeah. Mm-mm.
So that's a name floating. Yeah, the name, like I just don't know how young any of them were, so it would just be like guessing names at this point. I don't know who was young
when or whatever. Yeah.
It's like I have a list, but I don't know when they did it.
All right. So
what do you got? Who is it?
Number 1.
Do I know any of these people?
You should. So number 1 is a Swiss player.
Federer.
Dang. Yes. This player won the 1997 Australian Open. Martina Hingis.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you know that. You also know the second youngest person, perhaps the most tragic career in tennis, was once stabbed on the court by a stalker, cutting part of her career out. The Yugoslavian/U.S. national Monica Seles.
No. Yeah. What a career.
Yeah. 1990 French Open was her first thing. And I always put Seles and Hingis as contemporaries because later in Seles' career they kind of were. But they were 7 years apart. Both of them 16 years old. 16 years old, 117 days. 16 years old, 189 days.
Jeez.
Crazy. Third place was Tracy Austin. She was 16 when she won the U.S. Open in 1979. Fifth place, I knew this name but would never have got it. Arantxa Sanchez Vicario.
Vicario sounds familiar.
I remember that name watching it because it's like Jose Maria Olazabal, where it's like just the coolest name you've ever heard. You can't forget it. Yeah. So Arantxa Sanchez Vicario.
Yeah.
Won the 1989 French Open. She's fifth. Steffi Graf.
Oh,
Steffi Graf. Yeah, that's the other one I knew.
Jeez.
She's seventh. She was 17 years old when she won the 1987 French Open. I did not know this person. The 1980 Australian Open winner was Hannah Mandilkova. Did not know that. And then also in 2004 was a big year for young Grand Slam winners, Svetlana Kuznetsova.
Yeah.
Won the 2004 U.S. Open. She was 19 when she did that, and she is 10th on the list. So there you go. You got what? You got two of them before we conked out.
Two.
Right? Yeah.
And
People at
yeah,
home are like,
the
Monica Seles,
names. Yeah, no,
Martina
they're all like,
Hingis, come on. Which is fair. Hey, you didn't Patrick Waugh this one though. So
dude, I can't make that up. I was not joking.
what was the one I screwed up that one time? Like Tug McGraw versus Christy.
It was baseball. It was Christy
and
Mathewson and somebody else.
Yeah.
You're like,
Not Tug
all right,
McGraw,
I
that's
got
wrong.
it.
Yeah, I knew who it was. Give it to me.
No.
All right. So back to our story. I left off telling you that Emma Raducanu had earned herself a spot in the qualifiers of the U.S. Open, and it's important that I tell you how you qualify for a Grand Slam, because I didn't know this until doing this research. I knew there was 128 players. I didn't know how they did it. I didn't know how it worked out, and so I'll tell you so now you can know, and tell your friends when you're at wherever you watch tennis. 104 slots go to the top ranked players that sign up for the championship itself. It is never, unlike golf, which is pretty typical that the top players all show up. It's 104. You never get the top 104 to show up. There's always somebody hurt, somebody sick, somebody has a prior commitment, somebody just ain't feeling it this year. So it's the 104 that sign up. So you could be 110th. 6 players ahead of you don't show up, you get a guaranteed spot. You're in the main draw. Congratulations. The tournaments get 8 wild card spots. If you're a golf fan, these are like sponsors exemptions. The tournament themselves can choose who these 8 things go to. It can be anybody they want to. It could be former champions that don't qualify. It could be young players from your country, which is how Wimbledon was looking at Raducanu in the first place, right? Let's give her some experience. Let her show her off to the world. It could be just anything. 8 players are wild cards, and so that gives you 112. The last 16 spots go to qualifiers. And the way the U.S. Open does this is they take the next 128 players in the rankings who sign up. 100, the same number of players that are going to be in the main draw are the number of players you are competing with for an available 16 spots.
16 out of 128. God.
There are 3 rounds of qualifiers to make the U.S. Open. And Raducanu showed up. She played the 285th ranked player in the world in her first qualifying match and won 6-1, 6-2. She played the 167th player in the world in qualifier round 2. This player had 2 round of 64 appearances to her name that year, meaning she had won a match in both Grand Slams to that point, or 2 of the 3 Grand Slams to that point. She beat her 6-3, 7-5. So a tight second set. Tight second set, but won. Then she defeated Mayor Sheriff to make the main draw. 3 wins in 3 rounds to make the 128 woman field of the U.S. Open. And once she got to the main draw, she just kept winning. Not just matches, but sets. In the first round, and the second, and the third, and the fourth, and the fifth, and the sixth. She never dropped a set on her way to the U.S. Open final. There, in the finals, she faced her regular junior rival, a person that had beaten her in a Wimbledon junior, whom she had beat in a Wimbledon junior earlier in their junior careers, Leylah Fernandez. And there, she didn't drop a set again, winning in straight sets to become the first player, regardless of gender, in the Open era to win a Grand Slam as a qualifier. She won 10 matches in a row to become the Open champion. Like we were talking about earlier, like a tournament is about being the person who can win 6 games or 7 matches in a tennis event. Like you're the one who could do that in this 2-week stretch. She did 10 matches in a row to win the title.
That's a lot. Like just playing through a because tennis matches are grueling. Like for women, what's like an hour 30 to 2 hours 30 for 3 full sets, maybe. I guess that sounds about right. Like that's a long day because that's a lot of work to do it once, and then to come back and do it a couple days later, and then to come back and do it a couple days later, and to do it again and again and again and again and again without losing any sets. Like what are I'm sure like the all-time greats once won majors without dropping any sets. But at what point, of course, a qualifier had never won a major, much less done it without dropping a set. But the fact that she did both of those things at the same tournament to still be as young, like she's top 10 youngest women in the world to ever win a major, did it through the qualifier and did it without losing, basically.
Yeah, so to win, I mean, you're essentially playing in the main draw. You're playing once every other day. Same thing for the qualifiers. There's 3 rounds over 6 days. So she played every other day for essentially 3 weeks.
20 days.
20 days. Played tennis every other day. Did not drop a set to anyone she faced. And faced, top 50, top 20 players on her way to do that. And again, the only player, man or woman, in the open air, since they started letting professionals play in these tournaments, no one has come from outside the 112 guaranteed slots to win one of these things. No one. And that to me is mind-blowing that this person just shows up and does this dramatic thing like that no one else has done. There's not many things in tennis no one else has done.
It's been around for a while.
One of them. She's also the first player, again, regardless of gender, to win a Grand Slam with 2 or fewer main draw appearances. This was only her second Grand Slam. She was a winner. She tied Bianca Andreescu, got that name right too, as the only players to win the U.S. Open in their first appearance at the U.S. Open. And again, that's in the Open era. But Andreescu had played multiple other Grand Slams. Those are all records, obviously.
Imagine.
They are records that are not likely to be tied or broken, given how rare it was for it to happen in the first place. So shout out to her. Her 2021, between coming off this COVID semi-fame, proving she's an excellent student, making the round of 16 at Wimbledon, and then winning the U.S. Open, there are not many years better than her 2021.
It is an impressive 12. Yeah, it is an impressive 12 months altogether. But I do wonder, I should say, that winning a major from a qualifier feels like the kind of thing that a sport goes a century with it never happening, and then it happens twice in 5 years. You know what I mean?
Are you referencing perhaps that one time that Virginia lost to the University of Maryland? And then Purdue loses to Fairleigh Dickinson.
Yeah, right. Isn't that funny?
Isn't
that funny? It does feel like one of those oh my God, this has never happened. It's been decades or it's been centuries, and this has never happened before. And then, man, it happened again. It's like, well, and I have a theory as to why I think the 16s will continue to upset ones now that it's started. I think there is a pathway for it to happen more often,
for sure.
But I'm a lot more familiar with college basketball and the way that things work. I don't know if this is possible, the way that is potentially possible, but it does seem like one of those sports anomalies that like, oh, it never happened before, and then it happened twice in 5 years kind of thing.
Yeah. To her credit, and to that credit, like it's never happened before. It very much looks like, and this is not to downplay Raducanu, she ended up ending that year ranked number 20 in the world, like from the 300s to the 20th best player in all of the world. She moved up to the world's number 10 last year in 2022. But the Grand Slams are where you really earn ranking points in women's tennis. And she lost in the second round at the Australian, the French, and Wimbledon. Lost in the first round of last year's US Open. Lost in the second round of this year's Australian Open. So kind of hitting around a 64 snag and currently sits number 77. That being said, and this relates to your previous point, there are only ever 128 women with Grand Slam championships.
Ever.
You
for a year, for how many years?
For 100 and something years. There's been 453 contested, I think is the number.
Whew.
Like, you could feel a Grand Slam field, a single Grand Slam field with Grand Slam champions. 128. That's how many there's
sick.
Been.
What an idea.
That's, yeah, so that's anybody who's making a tennis video game that can get all the name, image, and likenesses possible. There's your opportunity. But 128 winners, she's one of them, and in perhaps the most spectacular fashion possible. A qualifier out of nowhere, 10 matches in 20 days, never loses a set. Like, not Serena Williams dominating everybody, not Nadal, not Federer, just smoking people on their preferred court because you can't beat them. You're the 8th youngest person ever, and you do it in a way that no one has ever done it. Don't take anything away from her. 77th in the world right now or not, never going to take that away from her ever.
No, you reach that pinnacle one time, and you are on a list of incredible athletes of your sport for the rest of time. I do wonder, like you see this happen in sports, especially individual sports. It seems I was having a conversation with somebody about this with golf recently. It seems like you're kind of unknown and you can focus on the sport and yourself, and you're young. And so you only have yourself and your work or the sport to focus on. As soon as you win a major, the sponsors are calling, the family starts calling. Oh, I know how much money you just won. You're rich. Yeah. And you've all these priorities and these deals and the fame and the appearances. And it just becomes so much more about the sport that got you there and more about running an individual business or an individual brand. And so that does seem to happen. Like, Rory won 4 golf majors in 2-3 years and hasn't won a ton of them since. Jordan Spieth won a few within like 2 years, haven't won a lot of them since. Brooks Koepka had a run for a couple years, is now playing for blood money. So it's like you have this thing where, like, at some point it becomes more about, like, JJ Watt. I remember a quote JJ Watt said, an NFL player for a long time ago. Somebody asked him, like, mid-career, right, 8 years in, are you ever going to get married? Are you ever going to have kids? He's like, I don't have time for a relationship. Like, I'm married to the game right now. And when his physical ability started dwindling, that's when he slowly brought that in. And now he's retired with a wife and a young child. And so, but like, that fame can be incredibly overwhelming, especially when you're the youngest player to ever do it, or one of the youngest players to ever do something like that. Such an incredible feat. So hopefully, I say all that to say, not to take anything away from her, but it is hard. Like, sports fans are incredibly spoiled in that, like, you reach greatness once and then it's greatness or bust every year after that, right? And so, like, you can't put that on her. You can't put that on a team, because every year is so different. Every competition is so different. You can't. Yeah. That's nothing against her, but it is harder now. Now that you've won one, it's harder to repeat.
So to put this in further perspective, the Open era started in 1968 when professionals were allowed in these Grand Slams. 58 women in the 55 plus one Grand Slam. 58 women have won a Grand Slam, which is to the point of is it going to happen more often?
Mm-hmm.
No, because we're still not to the point where we get
lots of different champions,
Grand Slam champions every year. So like this is one of those things where like we may be looking at people who are children right now turning 18, right? People who are 5-6 years old. So we're talking 10, 15, 20 years down the road before we see this happen again. And with any regularity, probably not. 58 women in 55 years plus a tournament have won one. So no, I don't think it is incredible what she's done, and she could retire tomorrow and still be one of the best stories in tennis, I think.
Yeah. And of course, winning a 16 seed in the NCAA tournament, a 16 seed beating a 1 seed once. What happens after that? They get kicked. It's like they played one great game. She played 10 nearly flawless matches in 20 days to do it. Never lost, didn't lose a set over 3 weeks.
And is still only 21 years old.
Yeah, still like probably not in her prime. So
sorry,
I mean, it's
she's not 21 until November. She's still 20 years old.
See, there you go.
She has what'd you say 10 15 years?
Yeah, at least
to keep
she'd
playing.
easily be a professional. I mean, she could. Yeah, you'd be a professional. She could continue to be a professional almost as long as she has been alive to this point in her life. So like.
Yes.
Plenty of time left. I hope she comes back, and I hope she wins another one. I hope she wins all of them. Give them all to her. Yeah, they need all the help they can get.
It's coming home. It's the international sports equivalent of Texas is back, and
that's how we got it.
If you've got a story you want us to cover, be sure to hit us up. We do have a couple in the hopper that people have submitted. So be sure to let us know about any stories you got, and we will get to them. And hit us up on social media. But until next time, thanks for listening.
Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of What You Don't Know About Sports. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please leave us a review, 5 stars only please, and hit that subscribe button wherever you listen. If you have a great sports story, we want to hear about it. You can connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at WYDKAS Podcast, and on our YouTube channel at What You Don't Know About Sports Podcast. All episodes are written, recorded, and edited by us. Stay tuned for the next episode.